Chairman, members.
How you doing?
It's Allison Joe, the Deputy Director of the Strategic Growth Council, will join me, if you please.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the opportunity to explain the Sustainable Communities Implementation Program to you today. This program builds on a history of the Strategic Growth Council supporting $85 million in local planning grants for communities seeking to create plans that are consistent with regional sustainable community strategies, and another $45 million in implementation programs to date. We were created in 2008 by Senate Bill 732, with the anchor of that bill being that we would provide interagency collaboration and support to local governments who are implementing the sustainable community plans that were envisioned in SB 375. Our most important tool to date has been the Sustainable Communities Planning Grant Program. We'd like to now turn that corner from being the planning program to being the implementation program. The program in the governor's budget is designed to fund the construction of coordinated housing, transportation, land use projects capable of producing significant GHG reductions. I know what the next question is going to be. And I think I'll join Richard Corey in developing an answer to that question, because there's going to be a range of greenhouse gas reductions resulting from this program.
Like Richard was very honest and straightforward.
Yeah.
And I appreciated that.
And we will be also this will be a public process with grant guidelines and applications with a wide variety of possible outcomes. There is enough research literature, I believe, to at least construct a range of scenarios that could produce numbers that might satisfy the committee.
You can come up with some.
We will definitely work on that.
Thank you.
The budget for the program is $100 million. The expectation is that we would leverage additional private and public capital to supplement that program, because the need is great and the dollars are few. And we're particularly concerned with delivering these programs to environmental justice communities, economically disadvantaged parts of our state, and we believe we can deliver 50% of this program to those communities. Our current round 3 planning grants have now been submitted, and 35% by dollar and by number of grant proposals are from economically disadvantaged communities. We think, given the more focused nature of the implementation program on infill sites, will raise this number considerably, since these infill sites tend to correlate highly with the environmental justice communities. Just to point out, in terms of the range again of greenhouse gases emissions, these programs or projects will be very similar to those identified in Regional Transportation Plan SCSs. SCAG, for example, estimates that projects of this type will reduce 2.5 million metric tons in their region. Now, we're only talking about a fraction of that, because this is a small number.
Is there a timeline on that?
That is is that 2050 or 2030? 2050. 2020. That is the 2020 number. Yeah. And so this would be a fraction of that, but it would bring some of those envisioned projects to fruition and bring them early. We believe that grant guidelines can be developed quickly. We would hope to issue an RFP early in 2015 after sufficient public participation, and be in a position to begin awarding in the summer of 2015. And then, of course, there would be the project build-out time, which might be a 2 to 5 or more year process, but within the 2020 timeframe, certainly these projects would bear fruit.
Yeah.
The nexus with GHGs in this type of work has been established in a broad research literature that has shown most recently in the Los Angeles area where the Expo line opened up 2 years ago now. The ridership of that line was studied by USC, and households living within 1/4 mile of that, or 1/2 mile of that station stop, had a reduction in vehicle miles traveled per household of 42%. Similar studies done by UC Berkeley on residents moving into areas already established for transit showed that those new residents reduced their vehicle miles traveled by 40%. So we do believe we have a strong nexus between the type of work that we're proposing and the outcomes that we seek. Obviously, these metrics would need to be set up at the front end of the program to only accept applications from programs that truly could achieve these goals. And we have a good understanding of what those metrics look like, again, from a wide variety of research literature and practice. The right ingredients to go into the soup are pretty well known. The outcomes do need to be measured, and we would require there to be baseline studies prior to the commencement of any one of these projects, whether that be the amount of walking and biking or transit ridership or other targeted strategy that the program proposes would have to be measured as a baseline at the beginning of the program. And again, upon conclusion of the program and at regular intervals thereafter, because not only will this ensure that we can prove we got the reductions that we promised, but it will also lead us to better understand how we can optimize these programs in the future. So, if you will, both an implementation program and a research program at the same time. The Strategic Growth Council and its member agencies, when you consider them as a whole, 7 agencies and 1 public member, have administered a number of grant programs ranging from the TOD Housing Loan Program to the Active Transportation Program to agricultural easement programs in the Department of Natural Resources and on. And we do believe that we can bring this knowledge and capacity to bear in implementing this program. And I know we're running a bit late, so I'm going to end there and let you ask questions.
Do you have, one of the questions I have for you as a person that practices planning and, like, we're allocating this money to you on a 1-year, year-by-year basis. The question I would have is, isn't that awkward, if you want to call it that, in terms of developing these projects on a multi-year basis so that you could achieve a particular goal that you want to have? Is that an impediment to you in terms of achieving the goal that you want to have in terms of creating more sustainable communities? That's one question I wanted to ask you.
Well, it certainly could be, depending on how we manage the program.
Yeah.
If we left stranded assets out there and incomplete programs because we couldn't guarantee or be consistent with the provision of funding year after year to bring something all the way through, indeed that problem could accrue. I think that the way we and the member agencies at the SGC would like to do this is to try and find areas where we can bring a project all up all at once.
Yeah, right.
And that is why we do seek to leverage this with additional private capital.
Okay. Part of the eligible projects are, it says transit capital projects. Well, what's the difference between the transit capital projects in this category versus the transit capital projects in the Department of Transportation.
Sure.
What, can you describe
If
what
we
you're
use
talking about?
that if we do use that category,
Yeah.
it would be very targeted for the piece of the mix that would be required to bring that specific area in which we were doing housing, transportation, perhaps infrastructure work, to bring that complete community into focus. And it might be something like a contribution towards the completion of the transit station stop in that area where the housing.
That's like a transit-oriented development kind of.
Yes, exactly.
Grant to complete a transit station that ties to a housing project.
Right, right. That's the view there.
Okay. Okay, I understand. Then the other question would be, if we do this transit kind of concept that we were talking about, and we have all these transit stations, and then there's timing of the transit stations, we're building transit stations, how are your plans here, like say we had a 15-year plan with all these transit stations, how are your plans here able to, or not able to, coordinate development around those transit stations when the construction occurs of the transit stations? The reason I ask that is we're now, my county, we're now in the process of building the BART to San Jose. Part of what we did is we developed plans around each BART station, and we're building the stations right now, but when you go within a mile radius of the stations, all this high-density housing, retail, and stuff in Milpitas and San Jose is now occurring. All this huge amount of construction is now occurring around the transit stations. And is the timing of the construction of those kinds of projects and planning able to happen with your proposal vis-a-vis some rail project proposal that we're talking about?
There's two elements to how we want to approach that. One is that we have had a close relationship with local and regional governments throughout their planning process in getting these systems planned. And we would continue to build on those relationships to understand the planning and timing of those. And the second element is that we have transit priority areas that have been recognized throughout the state. I think the only real problem we'd have is, can the dollars that we're allocated here keep up with all of those projects? But the fact is, we certainly will be able to time it to keep up with some of them.
Have you looked at urban metropolitan planning organizations for models that are workable? I know that when I served as a member of the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, and we had Senator DeSaulnier, myself, Assemblyman Amiano, several others in the legislature and beyond, mayors. We developed the Transit-Oriented Development Grant Program that allocated $20 to $30 million a year to these transit-oriented development projects around transit stations, and it's been, I think, fairly successful. You look at the Mission District Station, the BART, Fruitvale, there's various stations that we put the money into have been very successful. Is that a model that you're looking at, those kinds of joint development kind of ideas?
It very much is, and we have enjoyed a very close relationship with the metropolitan planning organizations throughout our history. In fact, a substantial portion of our grant funds have gone to assist their planning and modeling programs. So we would certainly intend to continue that relationship going into the future.
Yeah, okay. I wanted to ask the LAO if they had any comments on this particular budget item.
Marianne O'Malley with the Legislative Analyst Office. We have no concerns with the general idea that building housing near transit or improving walkways near transit or increasing transit service could result in less auto usage and over time some greenhouse gas reductions. Our concern is that we don't see an effective process by which the SGC could identify which projects would best achieve those goals and whether or not some of these projects might actually go forward in substantially similar ways, even without an additional governmental subsidy.
Yes, okay, all right. Okay, that's a question.
Okay, first of all, I appreciate your question, Marion. I think that recognizing the projects is something that in some ways has already been done. The sustainable communities strategies developed by the 4 large MPOs, MTC is not quite over the finish line, but almost, and the very soon to be released 8 San Joaquin Valley sustainable community strategies identify transit priority areas that that local governments, regional governments, local people have participated in identifying areas that they believe, based on the best available literature and their transportation modeling tools, would yield the benefits that we're seeking. And so
they studied those projects and quantified greenhouse gas emission reductions or any of those kinds of in that sense.
They have.
I think that's kind of the point of the question.
Yeah, at least 3 of. I'm not as familiar with MTC's process, but I am with the other 3 of the Big 4, and they have all used what are called sketch modeling processes that use normative numbers drawn from the literature and apply those numbers to the size and scale and nature of the project that they're considering. And that is how they came up with the reductions which they have pledged in their sustainable community strategies. So we would rely on those same numbers. Those are the best available numbers when you go into any kind of a design project like this.
Okay, I think it's important that we work on those numbers and then quantify it and maybe work with the, we can work with Richard Corey, who, you know, is our air expert guy, who talked about doing that, and if we can really try to pin that down so we can make some judgmental decisions on what the most effective projects are within the sustainable communities category that would reduce greenhouse emissions quickly by 2020. That's kind of what we're nexusing on, you know, in terms of, you know, the process, and this is a very large sum of money that we're putting into this. Like Richard Corey's category, the zero emission vehicles, this is intuitively, you know, you can sense that this is going to be a good category to do it, but you got to have a quantification of it and really have some knowledge that we can display that would reduce the greenhouse gas.
And there are some excellent tools developed by ICLEI and the various universities and the MPOs themselves.
I need that.
We can definitely apply it.
Okay. Senator Jackson.
I have one question. I mean, this sounds like a great idea, and I agree. We need to kind of firm this up a little structurally and also find out costs. Is this something that we could then, or you could then create as a model or a template for counties to consider? Not just on a statewide basis. Is that something you've considered? You know, we've given you, what, 2 years of funding. Let's say it goes away. Is there a legacy that you can leave in terms of sort of identifying and having other entities and jurisdictions be able to use some of this modeling, if you will, in making its own determinations going forward?
Yes, I do believe that, and we've often talked about that who knows how long there will be the pleasure of this legislature or any other to advance this funding, but we believe it's a project that will be needed for many years to come if we're to achieve our AB 32 goals. And so we really are, the way we look at this is that this is at a scale right now where it's quite manageable. We can have some very good experiences with it, and in the process of having those experiences, we can create a set of guidelines that will be enduring.
Well, I would really strongly recommend that that be part of your focus as well, because I suspect there will be a time when this funding will run out, or what you've done can be translated into other arenas or other locations, really more jurisdictional than, and that this, to me, part of your reason for being is to create this kind of process that can then be used elsewhere and throughout the state. So I hope that that's one of the goals that you'll be working to achieve.
Certainly concur with your thinking on that.
And you could work with the LAO on developing some of that information for us. I appreciate it. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
We're next going to go to the energy category, and I'd like all the two departments that are going to speak on this. First, we have the Community Services Department and Department of General Services. Community Services is going to talk about weatherization upgrades, and then Department of General Services is our state buildings, our green buildings that we're going to have. So why don't we have them come forward and turn it over to you and make a presentation on answering the questions that we had. Okay. Thank you. Welcome.
Mr. Chair, my name is Jason Wimbley, Chief Deputy Director with the Department of Community Services and Development. Just wanted to thank you for affording this opportunity today to share with you or to address some of the questions you have regarding the proposed investment of GHG funds to further our weatherization program efforts. The greenhouse gas reduction investments will be used to augment the U.S. Department of Energy weatherization program, a program that embraces a complete and comprehensive approach to performing energy efficiency energy retrofits to residential housing. This approach involves the use of home energy audits to evaluate energy usage and determine the best suite of energy efficiency measures to improve the energy performance of residential dwellings occupied by low-income families. The program offerings will remain essentially the same as those offered under the DOE-ARA program, with exception to the incorporation of renewable measures such as solar water heating systems and photovoltaic systems to maximize energy savings and emission reductions resulting from weatherization activities. Just a point of clarification, the Department's ARA weatherization program ended August in 2012. And with the full expenditure of the DOE-ARA grant, the weatherization program was downsized to align with current weatherization funding levels provided by the annual LIHEAP and DOE program grants. Downsizing mostly reduced the size of the weatherization workforce. However, the core program infrastructure remains in place, and with respect to any appropriation of GHG funds, we'll have to undergo a relatively slight to moderate ramp-up to support the expenditure of greenhouse gas reduction funds in disadvantaged communities. GHG-funded weatherization services will focus exclusively on areas designated as disadvantaged communities in accordance with the Cal EPA Cal Enviro screen. The designated disadvantaged communities reside within 19 counties, and weatherization services will target single and multifamily residential structures within geographic areas. For the DOE-ARA and annual DOE LIHEAP grants, the Department distributes funds using a formula methodology that factors service area characteristics for climate, energy costs, and low-income population to support the statewide distribution of funds and individual area allocations. For the GHG expenditures, we're also looking at additional factors that are associated with the Cal Enviro screen, as well as we're reaching out to our counterparts with the CPUC to evaluate their weatherization efforts under their low-income programs to evaluate saturation levels in disadvantaged communities. This assessment will help guide the weatherization program efforts for both CSD and the CPUC going forward. To your question on the amount of GHG reductions for this proposal, the U.S. Department of Energy has commissioned a number of studies that has quantified the benefits of weatherization services and activities in reducing residential and power plant emissions of carbon dioxide by 2.65 metric tons per year per home, and 53 metric tons over the life of the measure. Additional U.S. Department of Energy studies has quantified the numerous economic benefits associated with weatherization assistance program. According to these studies, every dollar invested in weatherization produces a monetary return of $2.51 to the household and society. Over 70% of the return goes directly to the household in the form of reduced energy bills. And additionally, weatherization programs in general are widely regarded as an important utility system resource, providing a cost-effective method of controlling energy demand and reducing environmental impacts associated with energy distribution. To the question on how GHG will be quantified.
Get numbers. You can figure out something.
Yes.
You can say, okay, for this amount of money that we allocate in the program that we're going to do with the money, here's what you're going to get.
Certainly.
You can get that number, right?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Based on what you just said from
Yes.
the Department of Energy?
Yes, using those statistics.
Okay, that's what
yes.
we need that.
Okay. To the question on how GHG funding reductions will be quantified, as previously mentioned, the weatherization program uses advanced technologies, testing protocols, and energy audit software tools to guide the proper assessment of projects and the application of energy efficiency measures to improve energy performance of residential structures. These same tools evaluate the cost-benefit of measures, their produced energy savings, and as well as associated carbon reduction. And it will be the same source data that we would use to present to the ARB in terms of how we would devise the measurements and metrics for evaluating the benefits of weatherization in both the area of economic value and environmental benefits. Understanding that the goal of the primary goal of emission reduction, there are significant noteworthy co-benefits directly connected to weatherization service activities that I wish to quickly highlight. Energy burden reduction, which would be reduced energy expenditures for low-income households, improved health and safety of homes that are often inhabited by low-income families, improved health and safety, job creation through the direct hires of individuals and specialty subcontractors, and the procurement of material goods used for weatherization that can provide economic stimulus to local economies. The department will establish reporting systems and methods to track, measure results in these categories, and again, these are co-benefits that we have experienced in tracking under the ARA program that we will continue to emphasize with the GHG expenditures. And to your last question on when you can anticipate some results, under this proposal, we are looking to begin or commence weatherization activities in mid-fall to late fall. So that would be the first, and we're putting emphasis on single-family projects in October. And the multifamily projects will follow shortly thereafter, but they do require more coordination and lead time to
figure out how much per year you're doing.
Yes, correct. And so that concludes the presentation. Happy to answer any questions.
You know, when we calculate the impact on low-income communities, is that something you're able to do?
Impact?
Well, the law requires us to allocate a certain amount, 25%, to benefit low-income communities and 10% in low-income communities. Is there a way we can get you to quantify the amount, or do you have an estimate based on the law that we have? Is there a way you can do that?
So to measure the benefits?
Okay, you know, the law, I'm probably going to describe it wrong, okay? But generally, you know, somebody can help me if you want to. It's 25% has to be spent to benefit low-income communities. That's the way it's worded. And then 10% in low-income communities.
Right.
Am I right? Did I do that right?
Right.
Pretty much? Okay.
So all of our activities will occur within the disadvantaged communities.
Oh, okay.
So 100% of the
100%.
100%, with exception to the money, the funds that will support state oversight and operations. The balance of the funds will be allocated to local providers who will work exclusively in the disadvantaged community areas.
When we give a report to the legislature, we want to.
Yes.
We're going to try to get each category and show them how much of each category is going to benefit the low-income communities, and how we meet the law that we're obviously have to implement because the law has been passed, and we have to
Okay, good.
you have to show them.
Yeah, I understand the question.
yeah.
Okay, so hopefully I answered that for you.
The other question I have is there's in my community and others, there's organizations, nonprofit, job training, and groups like the Conservation Corps and others that are involved in the weatherization. Is that, and are those groups going to be involved in this process here?
We're certainly
Nonprofit groups that are like Conservation Corps. There's also union apprenticeship programs. There's other kinds of organizations that employ disadvantaged community members that need work or unemployed people.
and I didn't mention this in my presentation, but our program, we subgrant dollars to a network of community-based organizations that includes nonprofits and public entities. In the past, we've had direct relationships with the CCC and others to promote vocational training and green jobs, as well as to utilize those, provide training opportunities and job placement in our program. We'll certainly continue to do that.
This is an added benefit.
Yes.
That we could really help employ people.
Right. And that's an area that we continue to place added emphasis going forward.